To save her son, she accepted a marriage of convenience with a millionaire playboy who needed to inherit. But what happened next changed their lives forever. Before we dive into this story, if you enjoy thrilling twists like this one, hit that like button below, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching this video from. Now let's get to the story. The pop of a champagne cork was nearly drowned out by the pulsing electronic music and loud laughter, filling Liam Sterling III's duplex penthouse. It was Tuesday, but for Liam, any night was a reason for celebration. Or more accurately, a reason to avoid the quiet that left him uncomfortably alone with his thoughts. Surrounded by stunning models, aspiring artists, and other bored heirs, Liam raised his crystal flute, a charming, practiced smile on his face. At 30, he was the epitome of the golden playboy. Good looks, an incalculable fortune inherited from the Sterling real estate empire, and an almost pathological aversion to anything resembling responsibility or lasting commitment. His life was a succession of extravagant parties, impulsive trips to exotic destinations on private jets, and relationships as ephemeral as the bubbles in the champagne he drank. However, beneath the facade of hedonistic carelessness, a shadow loomed. His grandfather, Liam Sterling Sr., the austere and ruthless patriarch who had built the empire from scratch, had passed away 6 months prior. The old man had never approved of his grandson's lifestyle, seeing him as weak and unworthy of his legacy. Liam had expected a posthumous reprimand in the will, perhaps some financial strings attached, but nothing had prepared him for the ultimatum his lawyer, the formal and unyielding Mr. Arthur Davies, had presented to him that very afternoon. The memory made Liam's smile falter for an instant. The clause was a medieval low blow. To inherit controlling interest in Sterling Corp, valued in the billions, and avoid seeing the bulk of the estate donated to an obscure butterfly preservation foundation, a final touch of cruel irony from his grandfather. Liam needed to be legally married and presenting a picture of domestic stability within 6 months of the will's reading. The deadline? Just 3 weeks from that day, married. The word seemed absurd, alien in his vocabulary. "That's impossible, Davies," he had said, pacing the lawyer's luxurious office overlooking Central Park. "Find someone, date, plan a wedding. In 3 weeks. The old man must be laughing at me from the grave." Davies, impassive as ever, had adjusted his glasses. "Your grandfather was a man of strong convictions, Liam. He believed marriage would bring the maturity and seriousness he deemed essential for leading the company. And frankly, your public performance in recent years did little to allay his concerns." He paused significantly. "However, the will specifies legally married. It doesn't mention love, affection, or even consensual cohabitation beyond what's necessary for appearances. An arrangement, Liam. A marriage of convenience." The idea was cold, calculating, almost repulsive. But the alternative, losing control of the empire that despite his rebellion he had always known he would one day lead, losing the unrestricted access to the funds that financed his gilded existence, was unthinkable. "An arrangement," Liam repeated, the initial shock giving way to desperate pragmatism. "Find a woman willing to marry a complete stranger, lie to the world, just for money?" "People do extraordinary things for financial security, Liam," Davies had replied dryly. "We need someone discreet without a complicated past, preferably someone who genuinely needs what we can offer, someone who understands the transactional nature of the arrangement and will disappear quietly when the will's deadline has passed, upon receiving compensation that will leave her comfortable for the rest of her life." Liam felt a bitter taste in his mouth. It was cynical to the extreme, but it was a way out that left him in control, that kept him on his golden pedestal. "All right, Davies, find this woman, but quickly." While Liam tried to drown his anxiety in expensive champagne that night, across town, in a much less glamorous neighborhood, Sophia Rossi fought back tears as she looked at the pile of bills on her small kitchen table. The eviction notice, polite but firm, lay on top. Rent was 2 months overdue. The notice from her 5-year-old son Matteo's daycare about an unexpected tuition increase felt like a cruel joke. As a waitress in a noisy, perpetually busy Italian restaurant downtown, she worked double shifts most days, her feet constantly aching, her body exhausted. But it was never enough. Ever since Matteo's father, a charming but irresponsible musician, had vanished from their lives shortly after the boy's birth, Sofia had been juggling everything alone. Matteo was her light, her purpose, a bright, curious, sweet boy with large brown eyes like hers. Everything she did, every extra shift, every lost hour of sleep was for him, to give him a chance, a better future than the tight present they had. But reality was relentless. The money simply didn't stretch. The fear of not being able to provide for her son, of failing him, was a constant, icy presence in her chest. She stood up, forcing a tired smile as she heard Matteo call her from the small bedroom they shared. "Mommy, can you read the dragon story again?" "Of course, my love," she answered, her soft voice hiding the inner storm. "Just one more time." As she read about knights and adventures in faraway lands, holding her warm, sleepy son close, Sofia felt the tears she'd held back all day finally threaten to fall. She needed a miracle. The miracle, or whatever it was, happened 2 days later, entirely unexpectedly. Sofia had managed to get an advance from the restaurant and had rushed to do some essential shopping at the cheapest supermarket she could find before catching the bus to pick up Matteo from daycare. She carried a thin, overloaded plastic bag, trying to balance it as she hurried along the busy sidewalk. She was running late. Liam Sterling III, storming out of a meeting where a real estate deal had soured, was engrossed in an equally angry call on his cell phone, gesturing impatiently. He wasn't paying attention to his surroundings. He turned a corner abruptly, his shoulder colliding hard with Sofia's rushing figure. The impact was sharp. The bag flew from her hands, tearing as it hit the concrete. Cans of cheap soup, a package of pasta, a few apples, and a red onion rolled in every direction, scattering across the dirty sidewalk. "Ow!" Sofia exclaimed, more startled and frustrated than hurt. Her dinner and Matteo's snack were now on the ground. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you," Liam said, ending the call abruptly, his tone shifting from irritation to genuine surprise. He looked at the mess, at the woman crouching down, desperately trying to gather her meager groceries. "It's okay. It was an accident," Sofia muttered, her eyes fixed on the scattered items, her face flushing with embarrassment and annoyance. One of the apples was bruised and dirty. She picked it up anyway, instinctively wiping it on her worn jeans. Liam, standing there in his $1,000 Italian suit, felt an uncomfortable pang of something he didn't recognize. Perhaps guilt, perhaps empathy, perhaps just the awkwardness of witnessing such palpable hardship. He impulsively bent down to help, picking up a can of tomato soup. His hands, accustomed to crystal glasses and sports car steering wheels, brushed against hers, calloused from hard work. For a fleeting instant, their eyes met. He saw deep exhaustion in her large brown eyes, but also a spark of pride, of stubborn resilience. She saw in him the epitome of a distant, privileged world, the impeccable clothes, the ostentatious watch, an air of someone who had never had to worry about the price of a can of soup. "Let me pay for this." "For everything," Liam said quickly, pulling out his crocodile leather wallet. "I insist, I was completely careless." Sofia finally looked up at him properly, the flush on her face deepening. She stood up abruptly, clutching the mended bag and the items she'd managed to salvage. "You don't have to. I don't want your money. It was just an accident." The pride in her voice was palpable. "I have to go, I'll miss my bus." And before he could insist further, she turned and hurried towards the bus stop, where the vehicle had just pulled up, its doors opening like a providential escape. Liam stood frozen on the sidewalk, holding the soup can, watching her disappear into the crowd. Inside the bus, he felt a strange lingering sensation of something. Curiosity, remorse. He wasn't sure, but the image of those tired yet proud eyes stayed with him. Later, in Davies's office, while reviewing a short and uninspiring list of potential brides, all discreet socialites with their own veiled interests, Liam mentioned the sidewalk incident, almost as a musing aloud. "Bumped into a woman today, and a waitress, I think. Knocked over her groceries. She looked overwhelmed, but she had this strange dignity. Refused my money." Davies's gaze sharpened. "Interesting." Describe her, Liam. The exact location. Liam gave a vague description. Dark hair pulled back, expressive brown eyes, average height, simple clothes. He mentioned the street corner where the collision occurred. For Davies, it was enough. The lawyer, a man who believed information was power and had nearly limitless resources to obtain it, activated his contacts. Using street security cameras and some discreet inquiries at nearby establishments, Davies' men identified Sophia Rossi in less than 24 hours. Her background was quickly compiled. Sophia Rossi, 28, waitress at La Trattoria Bella, single mother of Matteo Rossi, 5, father absent, history of financial difficulties, no criminal record, discreet, hard-working. From Davies' cold, calculated perspective, she was perfect, vulnerable enough to accept, discreet enough not to cause trouble. The proposal was made to Sophia 3 days later. She received a call from an unknown number, a formal voice requesting her presence at the law offices of Davies and Sterling to discuss a confidential opportunity of mutual benefit. Intrigued and a little apprehensive, but desperate for anything that might alleviate her situation, Sophia arranged for Carla, her friend and co-worker, to cover part of her shift and took 2 buses to reach the imposing downtown address. The office was the antithesis of her world, silent, carpeted, smelling of leather and old money. She was shown into a conference room where Arthur Davies awaited her, his expression neutral. And to her utter surprise, Liam Sterling, the man from the sidewalk incident, was also there, looking just as uncomfortable as she felt. Sophia listened in stunned silence as Davies, with the clinical precision of a surgeon, laid out the terms of the agreement. An immediate civil marriage, a facade of a relationship maintained for exactly 1 year, long enough to satisfy the terms of the will and ensure the transfer of control of Sterling Corp to Liam, attendance at a limited number of key social events, signing a stringent non-disclosure agreement, absolute discretion, and crucially, no expectation of a real relationship. In return, a sum would be deposited into a secure account in her name, an amount that took her breath away, enough to pay off all her debts, buy a small apartment, guarantee Matteo's college education, and even fulfill her cherished dream of opening a small cozy children's bookstore. The initial shock gave way to dizziness. This can't be serious, Sophia stammered, the blood draining from her face. Marry? Him? A complete stranger? It is a business arrangement, Ms. Rossi, Davies reiterated, his voice inflectionless. A contract with clear terms and mutual benefits. Mr. Sterling requires a temporary wife to secure his inheritance. You, it appears, require financial stability. It is a pragmatic solution to both problems. Liam, who had been fidgeting in his chair, finally spoke, his voice softer, almost hesitant. Sophia, I know this sounds completely insane, and to be honest it is, but Mr. Davies is right about the nature of the agreement. It would be strictly professional. He paused, remembering her expression on the sidewalk. I can promise that you and your son, Matteo, will be treated with the utmost respect and consideration throughout the entire period. No one outside this circle needs to know the truth. It will be 1 year. 1 year of your life in exchange for a secure future for him. The direct mention of Matteo hit Sophia like an arrow. The image of her son's smiling face, the memory of her own sleepless nights of worry, the money, the security, the chance to give Matteo everything she never had. The internal conflict was agonizing. Her pride, her morals, her notion of love and marriage, everything screamed against it. But the desperate love for her son, the need to protect him from the precarity that haunted their days, spoke louder. She asked for time to think. She went home in a daze. She talked to Carla, who was horrified but understood Sophia's dilemma. She spent the night awake, watching Matteo sleep, weighing the surreal offer against the harsh reality of her life. Was she selling a piece of her soul for security? Or was she grabbing an unlikely lifeline for her child's sake? At dawn, with dark circles under her eyes and a heavy heart, she picked up the phone and called the number Davies had given her. I accept, she said, her voice low but firm. I accept the terms. For Matteo. The wedding ceremony, held 2 days, Later, in a drab, quiet municipal office, was the antithesis of any romantic dream. Sophia wore a simple dress borrowed from Carla. Liam wore an impeccable suit, but looked tense and distant. The only witnesses were Davies, with his briefcase of documents ready, and Carla, whose eyes were filled with unshed tears and worry for her friend. The justice of the piece's words sounded hollow and meaningless. They exchanged simple bands, purchased by Davies that morning. There was no kiss, just a formal handshake after signing the papers that declared them husband and wife in the eyes of the law. Sophia felt a chill run through her. She had just married a stranger for money. The move into the Sterling mansion the next day was equally surreal. Sophia and Matteo were installed in a luxurious but isolated guest wing of the vast property. It was larger than her entire old apartment, filled with expensive furniture, marble bathrooms and windows overlooking perfectly manicured gardens. But it didn't feel like home. It felt like a set, a cold, gilded cage. Matteo, initially awestruck by the size, "Is it a castle, Mummy?" soon became intimidated by the scale, the oppressive silence, and the absence of familiar faces other than his mother's, and occasionally the uniformed, discreet staff who seemed to glide silently through the corridors. Liam kept his initial word about maintaining distance. He spent most of his time away at meetings, social events, or simply avoiding the awkwardness of his new domestic situation. When he was in the mansion, he stayed in his own wing, on the opposite side of the house. Meals were generally taken separately. The contract was clear, parallel lives under the same roof. Sophia tried desperately to create a bubble of normalcy for Matteo in this artificial environment. She read to him, played with him in the immense gardens, where he seemed like a tiny lost speck, cooked his favorite foods in the industrial-grade kitchen, feeling watched by the household's private chefs, and dropped him off and picked him up from the new sophisticated daycare, paid for by Liam as per the agreement, feeling the curious stares of the other mothers. She felt like an actress in a poorly rehearsed play, an intruder waiting for the act to end. The loneliness was crushing. Liam, however, wasn't entirely indifferent. From the windows of his home office, or when passing through the silent hallways, he watched her. He saw her tireless dedication to Matteo, the way she had transformed the impersonal guest suite into a small, cozy haven with her son's drawings and a few personal belongings. He saw her patience in dealing with a Matteo who was sometimes frightened or bored in the strange environment. He saw the way she treated the staff with a kindness and respect he rarely bothered to show. There was a quiet strength about her, an authenticity that contrasted sharply with the superficiality of the world he inhabited. And it began to intrigue him, to stir something beyond initial guilt. The ice began to break, not with a forced conversation, but with an unexpected moment involving Matteo. One evening, Liam was passing through the mansion's vast library, a room he rarely used, filled with leather-bound books his grandfather had collected, when he heard a small, frustrated sob. He found Matteo sitting on the floor, surrounded by colored pencils and a crumpled piece of paper, struggling to draw a dinosaur that looked nothing like a dinosaur. Liam paused at the door, watching. A distant memory surfaced. Himself, as a boy, loving to draw, a talent that had been discouraged by his grandfather. "Sterlings build empires, they don't scribble pictures, boy." Impulsively, he walked into the library. "Trouble with the T-Rex?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Matteo looked up, startled for a moment, his eyes watery. Liam knelt beside him. "See here," Liam began, picking up a pencil. "The secrets. In the head, it's a bit bigger. And the tiny arms?" He started sketching quickly on the back of an old envelope he pulled from his pocket. In a few strokes, a recognizable T-Rex emerged on the paper. Matteo's eyes widened in awe. "Wow, you can draw!" The frustration gave way to a radiant smile. "Teach me?" Liam spent the next half hour sitting on the library floor with Matteo, drawing dinosaurs, cars, and funny monsters. The boy's laughter echoed in the quiet room. Sophia, who had come looking for Matteo, paused in the doorway, watching the scene with a complex mix of emotions. Seeing Liam on the floor, his hair slightly mussed, laughing genuinely with her son, It was the first time she saw a glimpse of the man behind the facade of the playboy contractor. An unexpected warmth bloomed in her chest, complicated by the manufactured nature of their situation. When Liam looked up and saw her there, a flush crept up his neck, but he didn't stop drawing. He just smiled at her, a small, almost shy smile, before turning his attention back to Matteo. It was a tiny yet significant moment, a crack in the wall of formality that separated them. That moment in the library, seemingly trivial, acted as a subtle catalyst. It didn't dissolve the awkwardness of the situation overnight, but it opened a crack for less formal interactions. Liam, perhaps encouraged by Matteo's positive reaction or by the sight of Sophia watching them without apparent judgment, began to emerge from his self-imposed seclusion more often when he was in the mansion. He started asking hesitant questions about Matteo's day at daycare, listening with surprising attention as Sophia recounted her son's small adventures and discoveries. He learned Matteo was fascinated by planets and that Sophia spent hours at the public library, finding children's books about space to read to him. One afternoon, Sophia found an expensive, modern children's telescope set up on the guest wing's balcony. No note attached, just the device aimed at the sky. Matteo was ecstatic. Sophia felt a mix of gratitude and discomfort. It was a kind gesture, but also a reminder of the financial gulf between them and the contractual nature of her presence there. Meals, though still often separate, occasionally coincided. Instead of awkward silence or Liam's swift retreat, short, cautious conversations began to emerge. He'd ask about her job at the restaurant. She had insisted on keeping it despite the contract's compensation, to maintain a sense of normalcy and independence, something that intrigued and secretly impressed Liam. She'd ask about the challenges at Sterling Corp, not out of nosiness, but with a genuine curiosity about the complex world he navigated. Liam, accustomed to sycophants or people only interested in his status, found himself answering honestly, explaining the intricacies of a real estate deal, the pressures from shareholders, the frustrations with projects gone awry. Sophia listened intently, asking intelligent questions that showed an intuitive grasp, despite her lack of formal experience in his world. "You have a good head for business, Sophia," he remarked once, after she made a sharp observation about a logistical problem. He'd mentioned. Sophia shrugged, a faint blush rising. "It just seems logical. Managing a busy restaurant teaches you a lot about efficiency and dealing with people. These small exchanges were like bridges being built across the chasm, separating them." Liam began to realize the struggling waitress was also an intelligent, observant woman with remarkable inner strength. Sophia began to see the millionaire playboy was also a man under immense pressure, with hidden vulnerabilities, and an intelligence he often masked with frivolity. The first major public test of their union was an annual charity gala, a mandatory event on the city's elite social calendar and crucial for Sterling Corp's image. The prospect sent Sophia into a panic. She owned nothing suitable, knew no one, and had no idea how to navigate that environment of ostentatious wealth and calculated smiles. "I can't go, Liam," she said days before the event. "I'll look ridiculous, I'll embarrass you." Liam, who initially viewed the gala as just another tedious obligation, was surprised by his own protective reaction. "Nonsense, Sophia. You won't embarrass anyone." He hesitated, then added, trying to keep his tone casual, "Besides, it's part of our agreement, keeping up appearances." He then instructed Martha to arrange a shopping afternoon for Sophia with a discreet personal stylist. Sophia protested, but Liam was insistent, using the contract as a shield for a gesture that deep down he knew was about more than just appearances. On the night of the gala, Sophia appeared at the top of the mansion's grand staircase wearing a simple but stunningly elegant midnight blue gown that highlighted her eyes and slender figure. Her hair was swept up in a low, sophisticated chignon, and light makeup enhanced her natural beauty. For a moment, Liam, waiting in the entrance hall in his flawless tuxedo, was breathless. She was beautiful, but more than that, there was a nervous yet undeniable dignity in her bearing. "You look stunning, Sophia," he said, the sincerity catching. him off guard. She blushed. "Thank you, I feel like an imposter." "You're not," he replied, offering her his arm. "You're my wife." The words sounded strangely right, despite their fabricated origin. The event was as intimidating as Sophia had feared. The grand ballroom of the city's most luxurious hotel was filled with famous faces, glittering jewels, and conversations that felt like secret codes. But Liam was a surprise. He guided her through the crowd with a quiet confidence, introducing her simply as "my wife Sophia," without elaboration or apology. When a particularly venomous gossip columnist tried to probe about the sudden marriage, Liam deflected the question with a sharp charm that left the reporter speechless. He kept his hand firmly on the small of her back for most of the evening, a gesture that began as a public display of possession but evolved into a genuine anchor point for Sophia in that sea of strangers. He made sure she always had a drink in her hand, sparkling water at her request, introduced her to a few people he knew to be genuinely kind, and even led her onto the dance floor for a slow, formal dance, moving with unexpected grace. In that moment, dancing in his arms to the soft strains of an orchestra, Sophia felt the line between the arrangement and reality blur dangerously. She looked up at his face, inches from hers, and saw something beyond the facade. Concentration, perhaps even a contained nervousness about protecting her there. He was looking down at her, too, not with the practiced smile for the cameras, but with a quiet intensity that made her heart stumble. In the car, during the silent ride back to the mansion, the tension between them was palpable. It wasn't the awkwardness of the early days anymore, but something different, charged with unspoken electricity. Neither said much, but both were intensely aware of the other's presence in the confined space of the luxury sedan. The facade had been successfully maintained, but something more fundamental had shifted that night. The gala seemed to accelerate the dissolution of formal barriers. Liam began cancelling evening plans more frequently, making vague excuses to his bewildered friends. He found himself looking forward to returning to the relative quiet of the mansion, perhaps hoping to find Sophia reading in the living room after Matteo was asleep, or to share a late-night tea in the kitchen. The conversations grew longer, more personal. He spoke of the pressure to live up to his grandfather's legacy, of the loneliness he felt despite always being surrounded by people. Sophia spoke of her passion for books, of her dream of creating a space where children could discover the magic of reading, of the struggles and joys of raising Matteo alone. They discovered unexpected common ground, a shared love for old black and white, movies, a similar dry sense of humor, a certain cynicism about the trappings of high society, he from living it, she from observing it. Liam was surprised by Sophia's sharp intelligence and pragmatic outlook. Sophia was surprised by Liam's vulnerability, beneath the arrogance and his unexpressed yearning for something more meaningful than his current existence. The physical attraction, which both had been tenaciously suppressing, became an undeniable undercurrent. A gaze held a fraction too long, an accidental brush of hands reaching for the same book, the awareness of physical proximity when they worked. Side by side, Liam had started asking her opinion on interior designs for a new hotel project, valuing her practical aesthetic sense. The break happened on a particularly stormy night. Torrential rain lashed against the mansion windows, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Matteo, afraid of storms, had struggled to fall asleep and had finally succumbed to exhaustion in Sophia's lap in the living room. Liam, unable to focus on work in his office, had come down to the kitchen seeking a scotch. He found Sophia there, making chamomile tea, looking exhausted but serene in the soft light from the fixture over the kitchen island. "Rough night?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "A little," she replied without turning. "Matteo doesn't. Like thunder. I didn't either when I was a kid," Liam admitted, surprising himself with the confession. "My grandfather said it was foolish." Sophia finally turned, offering him a small, tired smile. "Sometimes the things that scare us aren't foolish, just scary." He walked closer, stopping on the other side of the marble island. The sound of the rain outside and the soft ticking of an antique clock were the only noises. They looked at each other, the mundane conversation suspended. In that moment, The facade, the contract, the difference in worlds all seemed to evaporate. There was just the two of them, there, in the quiet of the rainy night. Liam didn't think. He acted on instinct, an instinct that had been building inside him for weeks. He rounded the island and stopped in front of her. He reached out and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed the soft skin of her cheek. Sophia held her breath, her eyes locked on his. And then he kissed her. It was hesitant at first, a silent question. When she didn't pull away but leaned subtly towards him, the kiss deepened, becoming urgent, charged with all the unspoken tension, the repressed attraction, the unexpected connection that had grown between them in those strange months. It was a kiss that had nothing to do with contracts or appearances. It was real. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, the reality of the situation crashed down on them. What had they done? What did this mean? "Liam," Sophia whispered, her voice thick. "I know," he answered, his forehead resting against hers. "I know this complicates everything. But Sophia, I couldn't help it." The kiss in the kitchen was a point of no return. The contract still dictated the legal structure of their lives, but the emotional dynamic had been irrevocably altered. They tried, in the following days, to revert to a semblance of formal normality, but it was impossible. There was a new awareness between them, an intimacy that hung in the air even in the most trivial moments. They began spending even more time together, now under the thin guise of discussing matters related to Matteo or planning the next public appearance. But the conversations inevitably strayed into more personal territories. Liam took Sophia and Matteo away for a weekend to one of his less ostentatious country properties, a rustic cabin by a lake. There, away from the prying eyes of the city and the opulence of the mansion, they experienced a glimpse of what a normal family life might feel like. They went hiking, fishing. Liam discovered Sophia was surprisingly good at it. Roasted marshmallows in the fireplace. Matteo was in heaven, and Liam and Sophia, watching her son, and increasingly their son, laugh freely, felt a happiness that was profound and terrifying. Terrifying because it was real, and its foundation was technically a lie. Liam found himself genuinely invested in Sophia's bookstore dream. He started researching discreet commercial properties in family-friendly neighborhoods, connecting her with accountants and small business consultants who could help her craft a plan, all under the pretext of investment as part of the agreement. But they both knew it was more than that. Sophia, in turn, began offering Liam a keen ear and surprisingly pragmatic advice on Sterling Corp dilemmas, helping him see solutions his suited advisors missed. They were becoming a team, partners in a way that transcended any contract. They fell in love. It wasn't a grand declaration, but a quiet acknowledgement that grew in the small gestures. The way he now instinctively reached for her hand in public. The way she left a hot coffee on his desk before she left for her shift. The way they both prioritized Matteo's needs and happiness above all else. The marriage of convenience was dangerously close to becoming a real marriage in every way, but its origin. But the outside world, and especially Liam's past, hadn't disappeared. The approaching end of the will's one-year deadline loomed like her cloud on the horizon, and there was Clarissa Davenport. Clarissa Davenport was not the type to take no for an answer, especially when that no came with public humiliation, being dumped by Liam Sterling shortly before he suddenly married, a complete unknown to secure his inheritance. Fueled by a toxic mix of wounded pride, frustrated greed, she had counted on the status and fortune marriage to Liam would bring, and sheer spite, Clarissa had been watching the situation from afar, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And that moment arrived at one of the most important events on the Sterling Corp calendar, the launch party for their newest luxury real estate venture, a residential tower promising to redefine the city skyline. The launch party was held in the massive unfinished lobby of the building itself, a cavernous space transformed for the night with dramatic lighting, ice sculptures, and an endless flow of champagne and sophisticated canapes. The press was there in full force, along with the city's entire business and social elite. For Liam and Sophia, it was another night of keeping up appearances. But now, the dynamic between them had changed. There was a genuine warmth in their glances, a comfort in each other's presence that wouldn't go unnoticed by keen eyes. And Clarissa Davenport's eyes were exceedingly keen. She arrived late, as always, ensuring a dramatic entrance in a scarlet-red dress that clashed with the evening's more subdued dress code. She bypassed the press handlers and slithered through the crowd like an elegant serpent, her eyes fixed on Liam and Sophia, who were chatting animatedly with a group of investors. "Liam, darling," Clarissa purred, interrupting the conversation without ceremony, a glacial smile on her perfectly painted lips. What a splendid evening, a triumph for Sterling Corp, as always. Her eyes then landed on Sophia, sweeping her from head to toe with subtle but unmistakable contempt. And this must be Mrs. Sterling, the surprise wife. The emphasis on surprise was laced with venom. Liam tensed instantly, placing a protective arm around Sophia's waist. "Clarissa, how unexpected to see you here." "Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world," Clarissa continued, ignoring Liam's cold tone and focusing on Sophia. "You must feel like you're in a fairy tale, aren't you, dear? Plucked from obscurity into the arms of one of the city's most eligible bachelors. Such an inspiring story." She paused dramatically, leaning in slightly as if sharing a secret. "Just a word of advice between women. Don't get too attached to the role. Liam has a history of, shall we say, rotating his Cinderellas, especially when certain legal deadlines are met." Sophia felt the blood run cold. Clarissa's words were cruel, calculated, and hit a painfully vulnerable spot. The doubt she had fought so hard to suppress, doubt about Liam's sincerity, about the true nature of their situation, resurfaced with full force. Before Liam could intervene with more than a glare at Clarissa, she turned slightly, raising her voice just enough for the curious onlookers nearby to hear clearly. "But I must say, Liam, it's truly admirable what you're willing to do for money. Even orchestrate such an elaborate marriage of convenience with someone, shall we say, perfectly suited for a discreet arrangement." The insult to Sophia was clear, the implication that she was a hired, disposable piece. Sophia's face lost all color. Clarissa's words echoed in the suddenly quiet space around them. The curious gazes turned to looks of pity, mockery, and judgment. The humiliation was public, sharp, and devastating. She remembered the proposal in Davy's office, the cold terms of the contract, the speed with which everything had happened, the months of growing connection, the moments of tenderness, the kiss in the kitchen, the weekend at the cabin, all seemed in that horrible instant part of a well-executed charade, a performance for his benefit. She was the convenient piece. "Excuse me," she managed to murmur, her voice choked, a knot tightening in her throat. She pulled away from Liam's arm and, ignoring his urgent calls, "Sophia, wait. It's not what it looks like," practically fled the ballroom, her eyes stinging. With unshed tears, the sound of muffled laughter and whispers following her like knives, Liam stood frozen for a moment, torn between fury at Clarissa and panic at seeing Sophia run. He turned to Clarissa, his face a mask of cold anger. "You've crossed the line, Clarissa. We're done." Without another word, he turned and went after Sophia, leaving Clarissa with a triumphant smile that faltered slightly at the intensity of his reaction. The confrontation back at the mansion later that night was anything but contained. Sophia was in the guest suite, hastily throwing clothes into a suitcase, tears finally flowing freely. Matteo slept in the next room, blissfully unaware of the storm that had broken over their lives. "Sophia, please, let me explain," Liam said, bursting into the room, desperation clear in his voice and on his pale face. "Explain what, Liam?" she retorted, her voice trembling with pain and anger. "Explain how I was the perfect idiot? The convenient piece in your game to get your inheritance? Someone perfectly suited for a discreet arrangement, wasn't that what she said? And she's right. No, Clarissa was lying, twisting everything to hurt you. Was she? Or did she just speak the truth? I was too afraid to admit that all of this." She gestured around the luxurious room. "That us was a lie from the start, that every smile, every conversation, every moment with Matteo was just an act on your part." The accusation hung in the air, heavy with months of suppressed doubt. "No!" Liam yelled, his voice hoarse with anguish. "It wasn't an act. Maybe it started that way, God forgive me. Yes, it started as a stupid, desperate arrangement. But it changed, Sophia. Everything changed. What I feel for you, what I feel for Matteo. That's real. I fell in love with you." Sophia stopped packing, her face tear-streaked, her heart breaking. She wanted to believe him, desperately wanted to. But the public humiliation, Clarissa's poisonous words, the very artificial origin of their relationship. Everything conspired against trust. "How can I believe you, Liam?" she whispered, her voice broken. "How can I know this isn't just another performance until the will's deadline passes? That you won't just discard me like Clarissa said you would?" "Because—" "I won't," he said, stepping closer, his eyes pleading. "Because the thought of losing you, of losing Matteo, is 1,000 times worse than losing any money or company. Because you, both of you, have become my world, the only world that matters." But the wound was too deep, the doubt too ingrained. Sophia shook her head, tears blinding her. I can't live like this, waiting for the next humiliation, doubting your every gesture. The contract, Liam. That's the only real solid thing between us. And you know what? It's almost up. You can have your money, you can have your company. Matteo and I are leaving, we'll find our own way, however hard it is. Sophia, no, please. Liam's voice cracked. But Sophia's decision was made. It was a matter of self-preservation, of protecting her heart, and above all, protecting Matteo from more instability and pain. She finished packing, lifted her sleeping son into her arms, and with one last devastating look at Liam, walked out of the suite, out of the mansion, out of the life that had never truly been hers. Liam stood alone in the silent room, the echo of her words reverberating off the cold walls. He looked around at the remnants of her presence, a book on the nightstand, a dinosaur drawing by Matteo taped to the wall. The vastness of the mansion had never felt so oppressive, so empty. He had followed Davy's plan. He was about to secure the inheritance that defined his identity, and in the process, he had destroyed the only thing he had discovered held real value. The despair that hit him was unlike anything he'd ever felt, not the fear of losing status or money, but the sharp, real pain of losing love, of losing family. In that moment of brutal clarity, Liam Sterling III realized the carefree playboy was the real facade, and the man yearning for the genuine connection he'd found with Sophia and Matteo was who he truly wanted to be. But perhaps it was too late. The days that followed were a blur of misery for Liam. He barely left the mansion, ignored Davy's calls, cancelled appointments. The prospect of inheriting Sterling Corp now seemed grey and meaningless. The silence of the house was deafening, every room echoing the absence of Sophia and Matteo's laughter. He tried calling Sophia, but she didn't answer. He went to the restaurant where she worked, but Carla, her loyal friend, blocked him at the entrance with a cold stare, saying Sophia didn't want to see him. It was during one of these sleepless nights, wandering the dark corridors of the mansion, that Liam stopped in front of an imposing portrait of his grandfather. The old Sterling stared back at him from the canvas with his stern, judgmental expression. Domestic stability, maturity, seriousness. Perhaps the old man, despite his tortuous methods, had a point, but he had sought those things the wrong way, through an artifice, a lie. And now, ironically, he only understood the true meaning of stability and maturity when he had lost them. A decision began to form in his mind, a radical decision, one that went against everything he had been taught, against every expectation the world had of him. But it felt like the only right thing to do. The next morning, Liam, with a somber determination, called an urgent meeting with Arthur Davies and the trustees of the fund established by his grandfather's will. His appearance, unshaven, tired, eyes but with a new resolve, surprised them all. "Gentlemen," Liam began, his voice steady, lacking its usual arrogant tone, "I've called you here to inform you of my decision regarding my grandfather's will and the inheritance of Sterling Corp." He paused, looking at each of them. "I formally renounce the inheritance under the current terms established by the marriage clause." A shocked silence fell over the room. Davies visibly paled. "Liam, What are you saying? The deadline is almost met. You have a legal wife. Exactly, Davies, Liam replied calmly. I have a legal wife, yes. But the premise under which this marriage was formed was, as you well know, an artifice to satisfy a clause, not an act of genuine commitment at the time. Although my feelings for Sophia, my wife, have since become deep and real, I cannot, in good conscience, accept this legacy under false pretenses. It would be dishonoring my grandfather's memory, however complex our relationship was, and it would be dishonoring the woman I love and the stepson I consider my own, he continued, his voice gaining strength. I've discovered that true value doesn't lie in controlling an empire built on deceit, however successful. If the price of Sterling Corp is my integrity and the happiness and trust of the most important people in my life, then it's too high a price. I refuse. The decision was final, irrevocable. The trustees were stunned. Davies tried to argue, to talk about the catastrophic financial implications, but Liam remained unshaken. For the first time, he was in control of his destiny, not by birthright, but by moral choice. After the meeting, Liam didn't return to the mansion. He hailed a cab, something he hadn't done in years, and went to the modest neighborhood where Sophia was living again, in the same small apartment he had helped her leave months before. The contrast with his former life was stark. He climbed the worn stairs of the building, his heart pounding. He stopped in front of her door, hesitating. What would he say? Did he stand a chance? He took a deep breath and knocked. Sophia opened the door a few inches, her eyes widening in surprise and caution as she saw him there. She looked tired, thinner, but there was a fierce determination in her stance. Liam? What do you want? Her voice was cold, distant. Sophia, he began, his voice thick with emotion. He didn't try to push his way in, remained on the threshold. I know I have no right to be here. I know I hurt you deeply, and I know words can't fix what I did. He paused, gathering courage. But I needed you to know. I renounced the inheritance, Sterling Corp, the fortune, everything. Sophia's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent, waiting. I realize none of it matters without you and Matteo, Liam continued, his voice raw with sincerity. I realized the biggest mistake wasn't the arrangement itself, but thinking I could control everything, including feelings without consequences. I was an arrogant fool, but what I feel for you, Sophia, the love that grew in me for you and for that amazing boy, that's the realest thing in my life. And I blew it. Silent. Tears began to stream down his face, something Sophia never thought she'd see. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness, because I know I don't deserve it yet. I didn't come to ask to come back because I know trust is broken. I just came to tell you that I choose you. I choose a life with you, even if it means starting over. From scratch, without the Sterling name, without the easy money. I needed you to know what my final choice was. Choosing the truth, choosing love, even if I've lost it. Sophia stood in the doorway watching him, her heart in turmoil. She had heard the rumors, seen the headlines online about Liam's shocking renunciation, the financial scandal of the year. But hearing it from him, seeing the genuine pain and remorse in his eyes, the complete absence of the old playboy facade, it was different. He had truly given it all up. For her? For them? Or for himself, finally? Perhaps for all of the above. She thought about the past few months, not just the pain of the humiliation, but the moments of shared laughter, the unexpected kindness, the connection that had blossomed despite everything. She thought of Matteo, who asked about Liam every day. Slowly, very slowly, she opened the door wider. Her own eyes were misty. "Come in, Liam," she said, her voice still hesitant, but no longer cold. "It's cold out there. Let's talk." The conversation that night, and the many that followed in the subsequent weeks and months, was the beginning of a long, arduous process of rebuilding. There was no immediate reunion, no easy fixes. Sophia needed time, needed concrete proof that Liam's change was real and lasting. Liam, in turn, had to learn patience, had to demonstrate his commitment through consistent actions, not grand gestures. He got a job, unthinkable before, at a small real estate development firm focused on sustainable projects, using his knowledge but starting from the bottom. He moved out of the mansion into a modest apartment. He started spending quality time with Matteo on weekends, not as a rich benefactor, but as a friend, a mentor, a present and attentive father figure, earning Sophia's respect with every small act of dedication. He supported Sophia's bookstore dream, not with a blank check but by helping her refine her business plan, search for an affordable location, connect with other small business owners. They became partners in a new way, built on mutual respect and shared goals, not contracts and convenience. Months later, on a sunny Saturday, the three of them, Liam, Sophia and Matteo, stood at the grand opening of The Story Nook, Sophia's small, cozy children's bookstore. The space was modest but filled with light, color and, most importantly, love. Liam stood beside her, not as the billionaire who had funded it all, but as the partner who had helped paint the shelves and arrange the books the night before. Matteo ran among the customers, proudly showing off Mummy's store. As they watched the scene, Sophia leaned her head on Liam's shoulder. "Who knew, huh?" she murmured with a smile. Liam wrapped an arm around her, his heart full of quiet gratitude. "I wouldn't change a thing," he whispered back, "not even the crazy beginning, because it led us here." He looked into her eyes, his love clear and steady. "Our contract expired a long time ago, Sophia Rossi, but our forever is just beginning." And as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the little bookstore, the family born from a marriage of convenience found their own definition of wealth, not in bank figures, but in love, trust, and the second chance they had bravely seized together. So what did you think of Liam and Sophia's story? Let us know in the comments, and if you're not subscribed yet, take the chance to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new stories. See you next time.